Everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Wednesday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky, JJ Redick already has his starting lineup. We haven't even opened training camp yet. That's next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers first listen of every day, Monday through Friday. No matter how or where you get your podcasts, this one's always free and never, ever behind a paywall. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with over 25,000 subscribers, Andy, all of whom are real curious to see what Rob Pelinka and JJ Redick have to say to the media Wednesday afternoon as they sit down ahead of next week's kickoff of training camp. Do want to let people know that today's episode is sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. So Redick and Pelinka are expected to sit down at approximately 1 p.m. Pacific to meet the media ahead of Media Day next week. But JJ Redick kind of preempted that a little bit. He appeared on the Lowe Post, the phenomenal Zach Lowe podcast that he does through ESPN, and they had a really long and in-depth conversation. We will break down a lot of those things, but I think the big headline, Andy, that came out of it is it took Darvin Ham, about 50 games to figure out what the starting lineup ought to be, despite most of the team telling him. It took JJ Redick -6 weeks. He has settled on the lineup that everybody would want and expected.
Yeah, for those unclear what we are talking about, it's D'Angelo Russell, Austin Reaves, Rui Hachimura, LeBron James, Anthony Davis. As JJ said, it is the starting five that went 23-10 last year. It's also known as a large chunk of the core that led the team to the Western Conference Finals in 2023. It is also known as the grouping that the players in the locker room are saying, why the F aren't you playing us together more often, Darvin? Why do you seem so resistant and going out of your way against playing what seemed to have worked before? It was funny, actually, when Zach Lowe asked him if he knew who the starting lineup was, JJ initially said yes. And I thought for a second he was going to do the typical, but I'm not saying right now, trying to create this sense of mystery. And then without much pressing at all, he just said, no, this is who it is. Let's put all the BS and theatrics and stupid mind games to the side. This is who everyone thinks it's going to be. This is who everyone suspects it's going to be. Why don't we just stop any speculation and stop treating everyone like they're stupid? This is what it's going to be.
And here there are a lot of things that I like about this. I mean, it's not hard. And there really isn't another combination unless you want to really start to reach here.
Particularly with Vando potentially not available.
Yeah, but I'm going to say that was where I was going. The only real other combination you could say is maybe Jarred Vanderbilt for Rui Hachimura. And that's something that, you could certainly make a strong argument for it if you wanted to. But that is going to be held up a little bit just by the fact that even if he's healthy by the time the season starts, the expectation is that Vanderbilt might still be, as the proverbial easing into training camp. You got to keep an eye on the guy.
And real quickly, for what it's worth, on my ESPN show, Lakers Talk, on 710 ESPN weekly, typically 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific time, I had Mike Bresnahan on as one of the guests. He's a Lakers analyst for Spectrum Sportsnet, around the team all the time. And he was the one that actually a few weeks ago broke the news that there was some uncertainty internally about whether or not Vando would be available to start the season. I asked him if in a few weeks there's been any more clarity, and he said no. So he allowed for the possibility that things could be happening that he's not aware of. But for the time being, there doesn't seem to be any inkling of him being any readier than the impression Brez had.
It's not, doesn't seem like it's going to be the best time to just go ahead and make that starting lineup change, because you might not be able to implement it right away. And just because something is the obvious thing to do doesn't mean that most coaches are going to do that. There are coaches that will say, look, we have to go in and compete, and we have to, and you waste time pretending like you're having this open competition for guys to find a starting role and all these other things that you don't. And so you're playing lineup combinations that you don't need to play, and units aren't getting put together that ought to be put together to build the kind of continuity that you want through the training camp. And it's like, don't do that.
To your point, Redick also said that he thinks depth is not really an issue on this team. It's health and availability, but that a lot of guys in the offseason runs that they've been having in workouts, he specifically mentioned Max Christie, Jalen Hood-Schifino, Dalton Connect, have been really, really good. And he said that whittling down a rotation could be very difficult. Like, there's going to be some tough choices ahead. With that in mind, if you know the starting five is pretty damn obvious. And by the way, too, you want to start out on a great foot with your new team as the coach looking to establish buy-in, having never done this before. Do the opposite of the thing that lost the locker room with the dude who got canned. I mean, because this was something that players very openly were like, what the F, Darvin? Like, I remember I asked Darvin very directly, I believe it was before the Bulls game at the Crypt, like, is there a reason that you aren't playing these lineup combinations from that Western Conference Finals run, basically these five guys in Vando more often? And I phrased it in a way that offered like real possibilities, like something that you saw on the film that you think could be more vulnerable with time and exposure or whatever. And Darvin's answer was basically, no, not really. Just hasn't presented itself. I'm like,
it was word salad.
Feels like it has. And you could tell that the players were like, I don't get this. Forget we don't agree. I don't get it.
And what bothered was troublesome about that answer, not to rehash the Darvin era, the short, as short as it might have been, is it's like, if he obviously had reasons. He had 100% had reasons. They may have been good, they may have been bad, but he had reasons, and the unwillingness to stand up for them. I don't even want to say like he owes us a justifies the wrong word, but to stand up for his choices, to even explain the outlines of them and why he wants to do A as opposed to B, what types of things. It indicates a lack of confidence in what it is that you're trying to do. It indicates a lack of faith that that you can say something and do something that may not be the most popular thing, but you can explain why it is and bring people with you based on it wasn't there.
Or it's arrogance and stubbornness. It could be the opposite side.
Maybe it could be. So as silly as it sounds, it is a major step forward just to have this done and taken care of. So everybody goes into training camp understanding exactly what realistic role that they are going into training camp to compete for. JJ Redick had a lot of other things to say that were really interesting. And this podcast, 100% worth a listen. We will get to this stuff next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL fans, you can enjoy this season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So let's just say you're in the middle of a game, you start getting a hunch on how either that game's going to play out or other games in the afternoon, whatever. You can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. So it's a one-stop shop. Everything's streamlined and easy. And you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Plus, as we are talking about, we are getting closer to the 24-25 NBA season. And our friends at FanDuel, they got options for you. As of this recording, the Lakers are 35-1 to win the title. Anthony Davis, 150-1 for MVP. LeBron, 200-1 for the same honor. Anthony Davis, 25-1 for Defensive Player of the Year. Dalton Connect, 10-1 for Rookie of the Year. That's FanDuel.com.
So, among the things that are worth unpacking is, he talked a little bit about the offense and what he expects. JJ Redick did on the Low Post podcast, a really long and in-depth interview that everybody should definitely go check out. Really ought to be subscribing to Zach's podcast anyway.
I mean, you can tell we mean it because we're spending a lot of time promoting this other Laker-centric podcast.
I have not clearly make it your second listen of the day.
Whatever. I'm just saying
that should be Locked on NBA. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Saying it's pretty damn good if we're telling this many people, no, really, earmark your time for something Laker-centric that isn't us. Yeah. It's really good.
For at least the Laker-centric for this episode. Talked a lot about LeBron and what how he anticipates. He did say, LeBron, Anthony Davis, and that availability thing, they are going to be paying attention to him. And realistically, they're not going to be available for every game and those kinds of things. So there's a understanding that of that built in, which is why he those other battles, so to speak, in training camp for a spot in the rotation are going to be really important because they have to manage this stuff carefully. Excuse me. But he talked about the concept of LeBron being off ball, and he did it in a way that I thought was really interesting. And because typically when you think of, oh, this guy's gonna be playing off ball, it's like he does not have the ball in his hands, runs up the court, maybe runs around a little bit, stands in the corner, waits for the ball to get to him, and then makes it. That's not the way that Redick described LeBron James as being off ball. He's going to have the ball. It's just a question of how he gets it and where he gets it that I think Redick really wants to focus on.
Yeah, here's part of what he said, quote, "It's funny because when I think people hear that in regards to LeBron playing off ball, it doesn't mean he's not going to have the ball. LeBron is one of the smartest players, and I think using him as a screener and finding ways to get him the ball in specific spots on the floor where he can be a facilitator and a scorer, that's what I mean by being off ball. I don't mean LeBron is going to walk the ball up and get ball pressure at 94 feet and run a high pick and roll every time. That's not how we're going to play. I think in terms of what the offense is going to look like, there's going to be a decent amount of movement. The shot profile will hopefully improve. We've talked about ways to get more paint touches. We've talked about ways to shoot more threes. We've talked about some of the leeway to give certain players in mid-range shots, whether that's in post or isolation, but hopefully the shot profile has improved. So he's talking about generating different looks all over the court and different ways to get those looks all over the court. And one of those ways they're looking to create variance is not putting the responsibility on LeBron all the time from start to finish of possessions. He will obviously run the offense at times, and you wouldn't want it any other way. It's a matter of percentage of the offense that he is running on a possession-to-possession basis. I think all of it. Or the idea that it's
I'm not even sure running, what percentage of running versus not running is even the right framing of it. I think it's just a question of initiating those things that you want LeBron to be able to do in a position that are more advantageous for him. Whether you want to define that as him running the offense or D'Lo is running the offense or who triggers it or who doesn't, I'm not sure that matters that much. It was pretty clear to me, and Redick tried to be, at different times be like, this isn't, shade on any particular coach or particular. So, but in reviewing film, both of last year, and I'm sure he didn't just limit his film review to just last season. I'm sure he's gone back to their title years. He's gone back the last few seasons with this team. It's pretty clear he didn't think over the last couple seasons the offense was run very well.
He's got good company.
Yeah, I didn't say there were a lot of people arguing with him. I just said it's pretty clear that he doesn't think that, and that he believes that there are multiple opportunities to increase the efficiency, increase the output, increase the quality of what they're doing on that side of the ball. He talked about he did note the only place that the Lakers have really leveraged anything in a way that sticks out in terms of league dominance is free throws. And he's like, we need to find other places where we can have that kind of advantage, so we're not relying on one particular kind of thing. And especially a thing that's getting a little harder to do now than it used to be. excuse me. So it was very interesting to me to hear him talk about those types of things. As we sit here and talk about internal improvement, he clearly sees opportunity with the same people, just doing things differently, better, in a more creative way to optimize what they have better. Whether or not it'll work, I don't know. Things like offensive rebounding and other stuff like that he wants to be a little more aggressive with. I don't know if it's going to work, but he sees the opportunity. That was very clear to me, even without him saying it.
Yeah, I mean, he specifically pointed out the idea of emphasizing the offensive boards more, crashing from the corners, that sort of thing. Probably he'll have to find some type of balance between going for those offensive boards and thinking about getting back in transition or how you're going to be looking to get back. I also think, too, just the idea of doing more things, not just more things in terms of the list of things you would do, but doing more of the things that you do well. Like, for example, for all the talk about the Lakers being the franchise that shooters arrive at and forget how to shoot, last year that was not a problem.
Nope.
Last year the Lakers were actually, took a long time for the narrative and reality to catch up to it in terms of how people even locally talked about this team, but they were a good three-point shooting team. They took a shockingly, and I would say inexplicably, low amount of them. Like, after the All-Star break, I think they were third in the league for three-point percentage, and they were like 27th in attempts. And even taking into account, free throw attempts, and even taking into account, I know paint touches, blah, 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 that doesn't make sense, especially when you're a team that's crappy on defense. You kind of have to keep scoring and scoring a lot in order to make up for those deficiencies when you're not stopping the ball.
Right.
Like,
I think
the math comes back to bite you in the ass.
There's some fear of, too many threes, long rebounds, you're taking them too quickly. They're not in the schedule of the offense or this, or that, or whatever. Sure. But what you can't do, and what the Lakers constantly found themselves doing, was chasing -10 at the 3-point line, -12 at the 3-point line, where like you got the same number of buckets or even a few more buckets than the other team, but they've got 9 more 3-pointers than you do, and therefore are winning the game. And like, you can't play uphill like that all the time. And I know fans, particularly old school fans, don't love the emphasis on the 3-point line, and I get it. But if you're good, there have been seasons when the Lakers were taking too many threes because they were bad at it. Like, if you're shooting 31% as a group, okay, fine, figure out another way to score. Like Memphis has done that in seasons past. They're just not very good at it, so we're going to do something else. Okay, but if you're good at it, take them. Figure out a way to design your offense so you get good 3-pointers. And I just, maybe we'll talk about this in the next segment, but I tie this to Redick answered a question from Zach Lowe about whether or not he understands the criticism, agrees with the criticism that he quote unquote jumped the line. And his answers, which we'll get to in the next segment, I think this part of the podcast where he talks about what he saw or what he thinks the potential is part of the reason why that question kind of ticks him off. And so we'll get to that next.
Locked On Lakers is brought to you by Game Time, the best concert I've ever seen in my life. George Clinton in the Parliament, Funkadelic, 1992, Palladium, Hollywood. They played, no exaggeration, 5 hours without a break. I have been looking for a concert that could top it. Few have come close. Prince at the Forum, Neil Young at the Greek, a different George Clinton show at the House of Blues. And as I keep the search going, I'm going to always use Game Time because they make it easier to get your tickets with features like Game Time Picks that filters out all the confusing, flowery verbiage, and they just show you incredible deals on great seats, and they save you time and streamline the process. They don't just offer great seats, they offer panoramic seat views before you buy, so you know exactly what the view to the stage and the surroundings are going to be like. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off.
So when he's breaking down, and he's not giving away state secrets, and he's not giving up, all of his stuff. But like, again, the tone that as I interpreted it when he's talking to Zach, Andy, about what they want to do offensively and where he thinks the opportunities to get better are, is one of a guy who really believes that he knows the game extremely well. He knows what he's talking about. He knows what he is seeing, and he knows how to improve on the product. And, using the same tools, which is what he's got at his disposal. And so when he is asked about jumping the line and the criticism of it, and, a comment from Doc Rivers where, he was saying, now you get a chance to see firsthand, how irritating it is to hear people like, in the media complain about what it is that we do. And a quote that Redick didn't comment on, but clearly wanted to tell Doc to go F himself.
Which he's wanted to do many, many times. They famously don't get along.
Right. So that's where, like, when he addresses that question, the confidence that he shows in terms of what I'm seeing, what my vision is, and what I know about the game, and the best way for it to be played, really comes through, and I think is at the core of why that question, while he understands it, and we'll talk about it, bothers him. Because I think he believes when people say, you jump the line, what they're essentially saying is you're not qualified. And that's the part that he really fights against. The idea that he's not qualified to do what he's doing, even if he comes to it in an unconventional way.
Yeah, I mean, he, in so many words, I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but said that he is in the position to do this because he busted his ass to get to this point. And that's what essentially got him hired, is all the work that he did for, as he said, 32 years. I guess he's just counting from essentially the moment he picked up a basketball, and certainly the time since Duke onward, playing at a high level, being a part of the NBA.
Right.
All that sort of stuff. It's one of those things where, honestly, I think two things can be true at once. And there's a little bit of the lady doth protest too much. Redick is correct in the sense that he has put in a ton of work. He was known as a meticulous worker and preparer as a player. He was known as a meticulous worker and preparer when he's been in media. He is detail-oriented. He is somebody that is known for just leaving nothing to chance, exploring all of the information possible, taking everything super, super seriously. He is obviously a really good communicator. He's obviously somebody who sees basketball at a smart level, because he's not even fooling people like you and me. He's got the respect of LeBron James, to where LeBron says, you know what? I'll do a podcast with you to talk basketball at a higher level.
Right.
Like, LeBron's not going to do that for some schmuck. Like,
and it's interesting, like, not to get sidetracked off this because it's more interesting, but he did say, like, he recounted the story. I didn't talk to LeBron about it until the offer was basically there. Then I talked to him about it, like, in all that time. But, like, everybody, oh my God, why didn't you talk to LeBron? I was like, he didn't have to talk to LeBron. LeBron would have made it clear to anybody that needed to have it made clear to, that this was a bad idea if he didn't think it was. JJ Redick was the leading candidate for this job for a month. It's not like he didn't have an opportunity to weigh in if he thought it was a bad idea.
Well, and also, too, there are plenty of ways to find out whether or not LeBron approves of this. Like, this is not something that caught LeBron by surprise, nor did the organization not have a very clear idea about how LeBron would feel about this. And you want to make sure, if you're JJ Redick, that you do as much to provide, and I don't mean this like in a conspiracy type way, but just reality, plausible deniability, because LeBron knows this is going to be seen as his hire, whether it is or not.
Right. I hired my podcast buddy.
Right. Where, though, I mentioned the lady doth protest too much. With Redick, the truth is JJ Redick did jump the line because he is being hired on every single qualification other than coaching record, coaching resume, what you've done as a coach, because he's never done it. And while he's certainly not the first person to be hired like this, all those other people were also said to have jumped the line when it happened for them. The line is real. Ask every single assistant that waits in it. And I'm sure if you did an anonymous straw poll to assistants around the league, did JJ Redick jump the line or not? You're going to get something close to 100% yes.
Sure.
That doesn't necessarily say anything bad, by the way, about JJ Redick, or that he'll do a bad job, or that he wasn't in his own right qualified for the job or demonstrated qualifications. And ultimately, if he's good at this, it won't matter. But two things can be true at once. Redick worked extremely hard to put himself in a position where if this was a club and everyone was standing in line, he would get waved through the velvet rope. Like there was a reason.
Right. Nobody likes that guy. Nobody likes the guy when you've been waiting in the line for 45 minutes and it's only pretty girls and JJ Redick that get through. You're angry about it.
Right. But like, he's not the owner's son, like his shifty layabout son who's been doing nothing and his dad wants to teach him some sense of responsibility. Is like, you know what? We're going to make him coach.
It's not a sitcom plot. But I think, like, if you look around, what I think we are in an era of this, and like, look, the Lakers, if nothing else, were one of the first teams to jump into this idea of, who are your general manager qualifications? Like, they hired a GM who didn't work in an NBA front office. And now, was that a good idea or a bad idea? Well, I don't know. I mean,
frankly, his boss, Magic, had never done the job either.
Correct. This is just sort of what the Lakers do.
Around a time that they had a first-time head coach in Luke Walton and the ultimate shot caller in Genie, who'd been on that job for like 2 years.
Right. I mean, Luke at least had sort of, coached a super team for a couple minutes, but
yeah, and he had that stint with the Memphis college team as an assistant.
And so, what's interesting about it, it's when the Knicks hired Leon Rose, I always thought that was a terrible idea, and it didn't look great, but now it looks fantastic. He's like, oh my God, like look at what the Knicks are doing.
He looks Dolan proof.
It's hard to do.
I mean, no. I mean, that's.
I know. It's a joke, but you're not kidding.
No, he should win GM of the decade just for being able to do that.
GM of anything, all general managers pooled together.
Hell of an achievement
across professions. But like, if you look in a lot of places, and this, I mean, look, it's very Rob Pelinka, because it's to think this way, but across the job market, there are, big pushes to remove the requirement for a college degree for jobs that clearly don't require one. Like, you can do a good job at this something, you can have a lot of experience, but all of a sudden you get to this thing and like, I'm sorry, at our company, we have you have to have a 4-year degree. So I've been doing this job for 10 years and you're telling me I'm unqualified because I didn't go to college. We are in the process as a society of evaluating the line, so to speak. Like, what is the value of the line? What things do you learn in the line that actually impact performance in a positive way? And what things don't matter? And I think for most people, they would say, having some experience as a coach is probably beneficial. But whether or not it actually is a thing, every coach that's, gone through the line, so to speak, most of these guys flame out and they get their head coaching gig and they're gone in a couple of years and they get recycled to another one and they're gone in a couple of years.
Especially if they're hired by the Lakers.
Right. Well, that's actually something else that, he did talk about that aspect of it. Like, were you warned about, are you sure you want to take this job because of not just, pressure, this, whatever, but like, the Lakers churn through coaches. And we're not going to have time to talk about it, but maybe we'll get into it later in the week. I thought his answer there was very interesting. He was very honest about the fact that people did warn him. So I agree with you that Redick jumped the line. And I think what we're going to learn is, to some degree, how much the line matters. People inside the line will obviously resent him doing it because they're waiting. People outside of it, looking for unconventional ways to make their way into this market, might argue, are probably rooting for the guy. I mean, again, apples and oranges, larger pool and all that kind of stuff. You and I never covered a high school football game before we started working at ESPN. We found an unusual way into this thing. We never hosted radio in, Cookeville, Tennessee before appearing on the radio in Los Angeles. Like, most people don't make their radio debut in Los Angeles.
No, our only market has been Los Angeles.
Yes. We've steadfastly refused to work in Cookeville, which I believe is a place, but I'm not sure. So it's just there's a lot of stuff in here that is true because this is how it's supposed to be done. It's how it's always been done. But, the value of it, would 1 year make a difference? Do you need 2 years? Is it 5 years? At what point do you can pile up as many years as an assistant and still flame out as a head coach? So I'm not saying you're wrong. I just think it's an interesting experiment to some degree to find out the value of these things that we consider to be, must-haves as we evaluate jobs.
I mean, look, when I said that JJ Redick jumped the line, I didn't say that it was a bad or a good thing.
No, you're right. No, I understand that.
Yeah, well, just for clarification, I mean, he did. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. It's too small a sample size to probably even say, globally speaking, that it's a good thing. It's just, at the end of the day, Redick will prove whether or not the Lakers going this route for him. And, we've talked about before, it was not a hugely robust coaching market in terms of slam dunk candidates to begin with.
A lot of guys who spent a lot of time in line.
Right. Well, it was, but also, look, the two guys that they identified as their front runners were either JJ Redick or a guy that spent no time in an NBA line, albeit crushing it at the college level. But
right. And the two guys theoretically at the head of the line in the NBA ranks as assistants, in Mike Nori and David Adelman, didn't get hired. Now, that may be because they looked at the jobs maybe they could have gotten and said, no, thank you, but I'll wait. But they also didn't get hired. So,
look, at the end of the day, if Redick doesn't work out, it will reflect, while it will obviously reflect on Redick in terms of job performance, it will ultimately reflect more badly on the Lakers because Redick did not hire himself.
Yep. So we'll break down more of what Redick said in this interview. Obviously, what he and Rob Pelinka say today in El Segundo when they meet the media. Cookeville, Tennessee, is the county seat of Putnam County, Tennessee. Population of approximately 35,000. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where
real quick. By the way, we had solicited from you guys, our listeners, our viewers, questions that you would want to see Rob Pelinka and or JJ Redick address for this press conference. We had intended to do this show addressing those questions, but obviously this broke and I think was much more trenchant. We will look, though, Brian and I, to answer some of those questions for you. Just because you put in the time, we want to make sure that they are addressed on some level.
Yeah, for sure. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with over 25,000 subscribers to the show. Make another Locked On podcast, perhaps Locked On NBA, your second listen of the day. Thanks again to Zach Lowe and JJ Redick for putting out a great interview and providing us a day's worth of content. We'll see everyone tomorrow.